Today we're talking about EC2, which is basically a virtual machine. EC2 stands for Elastic Cloud Compute Cloud. So C, Compute Cloud, two C's. So that's how they come up with their names at Amazon, it seems. So EC2. And if you look at competing services, like look at Azure, their competing service is actually called virtual machine. Google is called Compute Engine. Basically, it's a VM. So let's talk historically again. Going back, way back when, like before I even remember, we had these things called servers. Now, most companies had a bunch of these servers. They had one, two, they would have server racks. So this is the Lenovo server. But it could be as like a pizza box like this, or it could be a huge one with multiple hard drives. This does have multiple hard drives. A lot of cores, a lot of CPU power, and each one of them could run like a single thing. Like this could be, for example, an email server. This could be running Confluence. This could be running some CRM. And you can have others running a web app. Basically, each application, each thing would have its own server. And then came software like VMware. So VMware came around, or like KVM came around for Linux, and they started virtualization. So instead of each server taking on one whole application, you have a bunch of VMs here, and you assign the VM. You would assign it some cores, some CPUs, some RAM, hard drive space, and each one of these could be this could be running a CRM, this could be running Confluence, this could be running email, this could be running a web app, and it helped in terms of scalability. Like you can move one of these VMs from this one to this one. You can have redundancy. In the past, you'd have to have an entire server for redundancy, so it just made life more efficient in order to get work done. So like if I was developing a web app, which I don't, but if I was, I wouldn't have to take over an entire server or run the web app on my computer. I can just like launch a VM and test it on the VM, and that's not a production VM. So that's virtualization. And what AWS did was take all of this entire thing, and just put it in the cloud. Basically, they're running their own data center that has these servers, and we can launch VMs. We can launch EC2 instances on them. So that's how they solved that problem. So what problem are they solving? Well, every time, let's say we have one server. We have a very small team, very small company, and we're running one server. Right here, we have this. So we didn't have, let me delete some of the other stuff. Where's the eraser? Let's do this. We didn't have this. I didn't have, okay, I guess I have this middle server. Yay. Oops, oopsie daisy. So deleting is hard, who knew? And now let's do this. So we only have this one server, and it's getting full. And I'll have to go talk to my boss, tell him like, hey, boss, we have this one server that's being used and utilized, and now it's gonna be full very soon. We need to buy a new server. So what does the boss do? The boss goes and talks to Lenovo, in this case, or HP or Dell, and says like, hey, I need 3 more servers. Like, all right, cool. We'll send you these 3 more servers. Put in the let's send you the quote. All right, here's the quote. That's how sales work, right? They send the quote. Then the boss has to put in the purchase order, the PO. The PO has to go through like 7 layers of approval. If it's a startup, then maybe it's the boss already approves the PO, sends it in, gets processed, and now whoever they bought this thing from have to ship the server over. And okay, great. Now we shipped it over. So now we have to get into the data center and put it there. So we received it. We go into the data center. Oh, it needs power. We don't have any power outlets. We don't have any power coming to this rack. Let's put in power. Now it's making a lot of noise. We were okay with one server. Now we have two. Now imagine on a bigger scale, what would that mean? So we need cooling. We need to make sure that everything static protected and all that. And when you use AWS, you no longer need any of that. You just go on AWS console. You can launch a VM. It could be Linux, could be Windows, could be Cisco router, could be a Fortinet firewall, whatever is available on there. You can just launch it, and you don't need to go through all of that. Now, what happens when you launch a VM? So that's where EC2 comes in. So now you have the way they sell it. You have the flexibility, the scalability. You don't need to buy things ahead of time. You can just buy stuff whenever you need it, and you can do it. And we have 4 options, like on demand. Basically, I need a VM. I can just go launch it, and obviously I'm going to pay for the time I use. I'm going to pay for how many cores I'm using, how many RAM, and all that stuff. So you can do it on demand fairly easily. You can do a spot. You can say, hey, I want to book these 7 VMs as long as the price is less than a certain number. Think of it as a hotel. Right? You as an individual want to go book a hotel. You just go on whatever site, Travelocity, Marriott, and you can just go on demand book one. Right? Or you know that, hey, I'm going to be using this more often, but I don't want to pay a lot of money. So you say, hey, I'm going to book a certain number of rooms from you, but if the price of the room exceeds a certain value, you can just kick me out whenever you want. So that's spot. With AWS, they did something where you have spot blocks, where even if the price of the VM goes higher than the range that you've specified, you can block it between 1 to 6 hours, so they will give you some time to finish up your stuff. Or you can have dedicated, where you buy the entire hotel. Say hey, I want the hotel. Just give me the hotel. You're not buying it, you're renting it. So this is more like dedicated servers. You say, I want an entire server to run some information. Well, I might have some technical difficulties. Unfortunately, I don't have time to edit, so we're going to live with it. Dedicated. Where you say, I want the entire server, I want the entire hotel. Or you can have reserved. You know that your people travel. Let's say you're the head of sales, and you say, people travel on my team. People travel often enough. So I'm going to go work with Marriott. Say I'm going to book 20 rooms a year, for example, and you're going to give me a special price on it. So I've reserved those 20, and we can use it whichever way we want, but it just makes life easier to do that. So it seems that pricing, knowing this, is important for the test. I think a lot of people can figure it out. But what I find interesting is how you run VMs. So when you launch a VM, it could be Linux, it could be Windows, like we said earlier, but you're launching a VM. What you have to do in order for it to work is you have to attach it to a security group, which is basically a firewall. So you say, okay, attach the security group to this VM. And let's say it's a web application. You want, in that security group, you say, give access to HTTPS. And when you do that, the firewall automatically adds the HTTPS port that is used to listen, and now you have access. Or you can have SSH. In my world, in networking world, almost everything is done through SSH. We rarely do telnet, but you can add that in here. But basically, the security group is like a firewall. By default, it blocks everything. You don't have to worry about it. If you want access to it, you're going to have to go in and say like, hey, I need to provide access to these people through HTTP, through SSH, and you can give specific IP addresses, or you can open it up to the world. But also, like, when you talk about this sort of thing, when you talk about an EC2 instance, a lot of times from what I've seen with AWS is the EC2 instance has to talk to like an S3 instance for storage. Like they do some stuff there, and they send information to the S3. So basically, these guys have to talk, and that's where like roles come in. We talked about roles briefly when we were doing IAM, but basically roles allow. This is an EC2. Roles are temporary credentials where you can give specific users or specific services permission to do something for a short period of time. You won't give them access for the entire time. So it'll be temporary, and it's the same thing as we did with the user access, where it's a JSON format. The same thing as with roles, where you create a JSON, not for string, like whatever document, and that will give you access to that. So there's a lot more information to EC2, and it seems that it's very important. But every time you launch EC2, it's like if you're launching a Linux machine several times, and each time you want to do a web server, every time you launch the EC2, it comes out empty. Right? It's a blank Linux virtual machine, but you can add a bootstrap script in here where it allows you to pre-install some stuff. So every time you launch the EC2 instance, or the first time you launch the EC2 instance, it will come ready with Apache web server, for example. So I think that's it for this video for today. Next week, I'm probably going to talk a little bit more about metadata. We're going to talk about networking. These seem a little bit more advanced roles, and I am taking my time to actually understand them a little bit better and what they do in terms of business. For me, EC2 is pretty obvious what it does in terms of business, but then you have all the functionality that comes on top of it that can help or may just complicate stuff, and I need to learn that a little bit better before I share that information with you. So part one of EC2 instances is this, and I guess I'll see you next time. Peace.